They thought she was just a technician, a quiet woman with a toolbox and nothing more. But when Corporal Elise Ward climbed onto that rooftop at dawn, what she overheard would turn her entire world upside down. A simple repair of an antenna became the spark that could either save lives or cost her everything. Up there with the cold wind biting against her skin and the hiss of static in her headset, Elise suddenly caught voices she was never meant to hear. They weren't speaking in her unit's channel. They weren't friendly. They were the enemy outlining an ambush, giving times, locations, and a target her own commander. In less than a minute, Elise Ward realized she was the only person in position to stop a massacre. She was not infantry. She was not special forces. She was simply a communications corporal. Yet fate had placed her on that rooftop at that exact moment to hear what no one else could. And from that second forward, her life would never be the same. Before we dive deeper into her story, tell me, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments. I love to see how far these stories travel. And if you believe that true heroes are often hidden in plain sight, make sure you like this video and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. The sun was barely rising over the jagged skyline of Forward Operating Base Falcon. Corporal Elise Ward swung her worn canvas toolkit over her shoulder, her boots crunching on the gravel as she made her way across the compound. She wasn't infantry. She wasn't a sniper or a special operator. Her world was wires, circuits, and frequencies. While others carried rifles, she carried pliers. Her reputation fixing problems faster than anyone else and doing it without talking much. Elise preferred the silent certainty of machines over the mess of human politics. At exactly 05:40 hours, the Southern Communications Array had started spitting static into the command channel. That was why her name had been called without hesitation. "Ward, grab your kit." South Roof, the comm sergeant, had ordered, not even looking up from his console. By 0552, she was scaling the steel ladder to the outpost rooftop. The morning air was sharp and cold, the tarp covers along the walls snapping in the wind. The antenna dish, usually a steady sentinel aimed at the horizon, was tilted slightly off axis, vibrating as though caught between two worlds. Elise knelt at the base plate, her tools clinking softly. She tapped into the line, her voice calm and steady. "Control, this is Ward on site at South Array. Beginning diagnostics." A bored voice crackled back. "Copy. No rush. Probably just the wind again." But Elise knew better. She had felt the irregular pulse in the signal while climbing the ladder. This wasn't weather. Something else was bleeding into the channel. She stripped the panel open with quick practice movements. The couplings looked fine. The frequency modulator was intact. She adjusted the tuning dial slightly and then froze. Voices filled her headset. Low, deliberate, clipped. Not English, not friendly. She'd only heard this dialect during training scenarios. Her heart began to pound. "Free. Convoy enters kill zone at show 7:30 hours. Roadblock already in position. Artillery staged on Northern Ridge." Elise's eyes flicked to her watch. Less than 2 hours away. The voices continued, methodical and cold. "Primary target, Eagle Convoy. Secondary objective, neutralize high-value officer. Codename Iron Hand." Her stomach turned to stone. Iron Hand wasn't just a code name. It was Colonel Marcus Hale, the commander of the entire sector. He was scheduled to ride with Eagle Convoy that very morning. Elise's hands shook as she scribbled every detail onto her notepad. She wasn't supposed to hear this. No one was. Yet if she stayed silent, an ambush would unfold, and lives, including the colonel's, would be lost. The question now burned inside her: would anyone believe a low-ranking comms corporal who stumbled onto enemy chatter by pure accident? A shadow fell across her notepad. Elise spun around her heart, slamming against her ribs. It was Sergeant Dillon from the watchtower, leaning over the rooftop edge. His expression was impatient, almost annoyed. "Ward, what the hell are you doing up here? Control said it was wind damage. Just realign the dish and get down." Elise's mind raced. If she told him now, protocol would demand she submit a formal report. That report would crawl its way through 2 different officers before reaching anyone with the authority to act. By then, the Eagle Convoy would already be on the move straight into a kill zone. She forced her voice steady. "Almost done," she called back, disguising the urgency hammering in her chest. In her ear, the enemy voices pressed on. feeding more details, grid coordinates, road markers. Elise knew one of the locations instantly. Carvik Pass, a narrow supply road, perfect terrain for an ambush. Her hands moved quickly, closing the panel while leaving the dish just slightly misaligned. Misaligned enough to keep catching the enemy frequency. She clipped her toolkit shut and began climbing down. Dylan frowned. You didn't realign it. I need to check the south junction first, she lied, brushing past him. But Elise had no intention of going to the junction. Her destination was Colonel Hale himself. The problem, she was a corporal in communications. To him, she was just another face in the mess hall. The only way she'd get near him was by bypassing the entire chain of command. And if she was wrong, if she had misheard or misunderstood, she wouldn't just be dismissed. She would be court-martialed before the day was over. Her boots struck the gravel in sharp, determined steps as she headed toward the command wing. In her headset, enemy chatter confirmed her fears. Armor in position by 0710, all units ready. Elise gripped her toolkit tighter. She wasn't fixing an antenna anymore. She was trying to stop a massacre before it began. The command wing of FOB Falcon was a hive of noise and urgency. Radios buzzed in overlapping frequencies, boots thundered across metal grates, and the air carried the heavy mix of desert dust and bitter coffee. Elise slipped inside, clutching her toolkit as if it were a lifeline, her pulse quickening with every step. All she wanted was to storm into Colonel Hale's office and unload everything she had heard. But in the military skipping, the chain of command was like stepping onto a live minefield. You only did it if you were ready to explode. Ward, you are not cleared for this sector. The voice cut through the noise like a blade. Lieutenant Braxton stood squarely in her path, his broad frame blocking the corridor. His scowl was permanent, carved into his features, as though etched there by years of suspicion. His eyes flicked to her badge. Comm maintenance. You're supposed to be on the roof. What are you doing here? Elise's throat tightened, but she forced the words out. Sir, I intercepted an unsecured transmission. Enemy chatter. They're planning file a signal report and wait for processing. Braxton interrupted sharply, raising a hand to silence her. That's procedure. Her eyes shot to the clock on the wall. 6:14. Less than 2 hours until the ambush. If she waited for processing, the convoy would be rolling directly into enemy fire before her report even left the desk. Lieutenant, with respect, the Eagle convoy is heading into a kill zone at Carvik Pass. Enemy armor is already staged. Colonel Hale is enough. Corporal, his voice was sharp final. You are out of line. Unless you have top-tier clearance, you are not walking into a colonel's office with unverified chatter. Do you understand me? Her knuckles turned white around the handle of her toolkit. Arguing further would only get her dragged out by MPs. But retreat didn't have to mean surrender. Elise dipped her head, murmuring, Understood, sir, and stepped back into the corridor. The moment she was out of sight, she ducked into a maintenance closet, her breath ragged but her mind sharp. She yanked out her notepad, every coordinate she had scrawled on the rooftop, stared back at her in black ink. She pulled a short-range field radio from her kit. If command wouldn't listen, maybe the convoy itself would. Static hiss, then chatter bled through. Convoy Eagle, this is Falcon Ops. Departure confirmed for 0700. Her pulse spiked. They were already loading up. Elise switched to a secure band and keyed the mic. Eagle 3, this is Comms 2. Do you read? A pause. Then a wary voice answered. This is Eagle 3. Identify yourself. Elise Ward. Corporal. Communications repair. Listen to me, you're heading into a kill zone at Carvik Pass. Enemy armor in position by 0710. I repeat, abort route immediately. Static silence. Then, Corporal, that's a serious claim. What's your source? She swallowed. Source is me. I intercepted their transmission directly through the south array. There's no time to wait for HQ confirmation. You need to change course now. Another long pause stretched through the static. Then copy comms 2. Standing by. Relief barely had time to wash through her when the closet door banged open. Lieutenant Braxton stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 military police. Corporal Ward, he said coldly, you are hereby detained for breach of protocol and unauthorized transmission. The MPs seized her arms, dragging her radio from her hands. Braxton sneered as he leaned close. You think you can play hero. You could be feeding false intel straight into a live convoy. Do you know what that means? They're walking into an ambush. Elise shot back, her voice shaking but fierce. If you wait for confirmation, they'll be dead. Secure her, Braxton snapped. As the MPs hauled her away, Elise's only thought was a silent prayer that someone in Eagle Convoy had listened. 48 hours. The Eagle Convoy rolled out its armored vehicles, grinding over the dusty road toward Carvik Pass. The canyon walls loomed high on both sides, jagged shadows stretching across the narrow route. In the lead turret, Sergeant Moreno lifted his binoculars, scanning the ridges. For a moment, everything seemed calm. Too calm. Then he froze, half buried in the sand along the northern ridge tank treads. Exactly where that desperate corporal had said. He keyed the lead vehicle. Eagle 1, hold, we've got armor in the kill zone. Confirm movement on the ridge. A pause. Then another voice, tense. Movement confirmed. Pulling back now. Engines roared as the convoy slammed into reverse dust clouds billowing into the sky. On the ridge, 2 enemy spotters scrambled to their radios, shouting frantic orders. Their ambush hours in the making had just been blown before it could even begin. Back at FOB Falcon, Elise Ward paced the holding cell like a caged animal. Every second dragged like a lifetime, her thoughts consumed by the convoy she might have just saved or doomed. The door swung open. Colonel Marcus Hale himself stepped inside, his expression unreadable, his presence filling the small room with an authority that seemed to crush the air. Corporal Ward, he said, his tone calm but sharp. You want to tell me why my convoy just avoided driving straight into a tank trap? Elise froze. Her throat was dry, but she managed to whisper, Because, sir, I heard them. I had to warn you. Hale studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. You were right. You may have just saved 12 lives, including mine. Her knees nearly buckled from relief, but his next words cut like a blade. That's twice now you've bypassed procedure. If you're going to keep doing that, Corporal, you'd better be right every damn time. The desert night settled cool over FOB Falcon, but Corporal Elise Ward's uniform clung damp with sweat. Hours had passed since the convoy turned back, yet the tension still pressed down on her chest like a weight she couldn't set aside. She stood inside the dim operations room, a steaming mug of untouched coffee at her elbow. Colonel Hale loomed over the glowing digital map projected across the main screen. Carvik Pass, Northern Ridge, shaded kill zones, all marked with the coordinates Elise had scribbled in frantic handwriting only hours earlier. You had no authorization to make that call, Hale said without looking up. His voice was steady, but his words carried the unmistakable edge of authority. Elise clenched her jaw. I heard them, sir, exactly as I wrote it down. Hale finally turned his gaze sharp as steel. And you understand the risk you created. The enemy now knows someone inside Falcon picked up their chatter. You've made yourself visible. She tried to steady her breathing. They don't know it was me. His eyes narrowed. They will. The silence between them stretched taut, broken only by the faint hum of electronics. Finally, Hale signed a stack of papers and slid them across the desk. Effective immediately, you're reassigned on temporary special attachment to signal, intercept, and field reconnaissance. Elise blinked. The words sank in slowly. She had been a repair technician an hour ago. Now she was being ordered into the world of active interception, a job reserved for soldiers who specialized in listening to enemy chatter. Her badge changed. Her uniform gained a new patch. But the shift wasn't all pride and ceremony. On the comms floor, some soldiers glanced her way with nods of respect. Others muttered lucky break under their breath. And Lieutenant Braxton. He didn't even bother to hide his scowl. By year 900, Elise found herself back on the roof. This time she wasn't alone. A two-man security detail shadowed her every step as she adjusted a secure directional array, scanning the airwaves with practiced precision. At first just static, then garbled words, and then voices. Clear, deliberate. Falcon Base has a leak. Source unknown. Sweep for female comms tech. Blonde. Mid-20s. Terminate quietly. Elise's stomach turned to ice. Her hands shook as she scribbled the words down her pulse, hammering in her ears. They knew. They were looking for her. Elise pulled off her headset slowly, her breath shallow, her mind racing. The security detail beside her noticed the change in her posture. "You good, Corporal?" one of them asked. She forced a tight nod. "Not yet," she muttered, closing her notebook. She wasn't about to panic her own guards, not until she had confirmation. But in her gut she knew. The enemy wasn't just aware their ambush had failed. They knew why. They were hunting her. She went straight to Colonel Hale's office notebook clutched in her trembling hand. He listened in silence as she read the transmission back to him, word for word. When she finished, he leaned forward, his eyes unblinking. "You have two choices," he said at last. "Go into protective custody or stay operational." The decision was instant. "I'm not hiding. You stay and you stay watched," Hale warned. "From now on, you carry a sidearm everywhere, and you'll have a shadow whether you like it or not." Elise swallowed hard but nodded. Understood. Her first new assignment came before the ink on her orders had even dried, an overnight intercept mission at Echo Post, a small observation outpost outside the base perimeter. High ground, isolated, ideal for catching long-range comms, and perfect for anyone who wanted her alone. That night, Elise sat in the dim glow of a single desk lamp headset clamped over her ears. The dish outside rotated slowly against a silver desert horizon. Hours crawled past, static, faint pirate radio music, the thrum of distant helicopter blades, then voices, cold, measured. "Target will be at Echo Post until 0400. Approach from South Ridge. No shots until inside." Her blood went cold. They were coming. For her. She grabbed her field radio. "Echo Post to Falcon, hostile intent chatter, confirmed South Ridge approach, multiple." The radio crackled once, then died. Dead silence, the lamp flickered, then went out. Darkness swallowed the room. From outside, boots crunched on gravel. Slow, steady, more than one set. Elise's fingers closed around the pistol at her side, her breath sharp in her lungs. She moved toward the narrow slit window, peering into the night. Shadows moved against the ridge. 3, maybe 4. One carried a suppressed rifle, and then through the wind a voice, calm, mocking, much too close. "Corporal Ward, you've been listening to the wrong people." The air inside Echo Post felt suffocating, as though the walls themselves were pressing closer. Elise Ward's heartbeat thundered in her ears, each thud louder than the crunch of boots outside. She kept her back against the cold concrete, pistol drawn, her eyes locked on the splintering side door. A scrape of metal on stone. Someone was testing the lock. Then a sharp kick rattled the hinges. Dust drifted down from the frame. The silence shattered with a crash as the door burst inward. A tall figure stepped inside. Weapon raised, his desert camo, clearly not her size. The muzzle of his rifle swung toward her head. Elise dropped behind the comms desk, her body moving on instinct. The first round cracked past her ear, chipping the wall. She popped up, fired 2 quick shots, and the man dropped hard to the floor. His weapon clattered away, but the danger was far from over. She could still hear them outside, whispering in clipped dialects she now recognized too well. Her enemies weren't guessing. This was calculated, a hunt meant to end tonight. Elise's mind raced. If she stayed boxed inside the post, she would be cornered. She needed to move. Slipping out the back hatch, she dropped into the open desert. The night was freezing, the sand crunching under her boots. She crouched low, hugging the rocks, her pistol steady in her grip. Up ahead, the ridge dipped just enough to give her a line of sight on the south approach. And there, 2 silhouettes, advancing rifles, ready eyes fixed on the post she had just abandoned. Her training told her to wait for backup, but her gut screamed there was no time. She exhaled, leveled her pistol, and squeezed the trigger. The first man fell instantly. The second spun, firing wild bursts. Bullets sparked against stone inches from her leg, forcing her to dive for cover. She scrambled up the ridge wall, clawing her way to higher ground. Rocks crumbled under her grip until she pulled herself into position. That's when she saw it lying in the sand near the body of the first hostile, a comms pack. Her lifeline. Sliding back down, Elise snatched the pack and flicked it on. Static filled her ears, then a clear channel opened. "Falcon, this is Ward. Hostiles engaged at Echo Post. South Ridge compromised. Request immediate QRF." The reply came fast, sharp. "Copy, Ward. Raven team en route. ETA 6 minutes. Hold position. 6 minutes. An eternity in a firefight." The last hostile broke from the shadows, charging her position. Elise ducked behind a boulder, her pistol steady. She fired twice, each shot echoing across the canyon. The man collapsed, his rifle skidding from his grasp. Silence. Only her ragged breaths and the faint hum of the stolen comms pack remained. Then cutting through the quiet came the heavy thump of helicopter blades. Louder. Closer. Until armed soldiers descended onto the ridge boots, hitting the sand in perfect rhythm. The Raven team had arrived. The rotors slowed, kicking up sand that swirled in the night air as the Raven team spread across the ridge, weapons raised, scanning for stragglers. Elise lowered her pistol, the adrenaline still burning hot through her veins. She could barely feel her hands. Colonel Hale was waiting when the helicopter ferried her back to FOB Falcon. Dust swirled around the landing pad as she stepped off enemy comms packs slung over her shoulder. Her uniform was streaked with dirt, her face pale beneath the harsh floodlights. Hale's gaze locked on hers. "Heard you made quite a mess up there," he said, his tone cutting between dry humor and sharp reprimand. Elise lifted the comms pack, placing it firmly in his hands. "They weren't after the base, sir. They were after me." For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Then Hale studied her, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded. "And now they know why they failed." To her surprise, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a small patch, and pinned it onto her sleeve. Its emblem gleamed under the floodlights. "Raven team," he said. "Unseen, unheard, unbroken. Welcome to the squad, Ward. Looks like you're done fixing antennas." The words sank into her chest with a weight Elise hadn't expected. She had joined the army to repair equipment, to work quietly in the background. Now she had been pulled into the shadows of a war fought not just with bullets, but with information and silence. Weeks later, Elise found herself once more on a rooftop. The sky above FOB Falcon stretched wide and merciless, the desert winds snapping against her uniform. But now she wasn't just a technician. Her call sign was known across the net. She tuned her headset, scanning frequencies. Static, garbled voices, and then enemy chatter. Her lips tightened. She didn't flinch anymore when their words crawled through the static. She listened. She wrote. She prepared. Somewhere out there, the same men who had hunted her were still searching. They could keep searching, because Elise Ward was listening. Days blurred into weeks, and weeks into months. Elise Ward adapted to her new reality, though the weight of it never fully left her shoulders. She still preferred wires to people, still worked best in silence, but silence was no longer safety. It was a battlefield. On rooftops, in hidden posts, even crouched inside humming comms vans, she listened. Every word the enemy whispered into the airwaves was a puzzle piece, and every puzzle piece could mean lives saved or lost. Her fellow soldiers began to see her differently. Some nodded in respect, others eyed her warily, as if unsure whether she was brilliant or simply reckless. Even among the Raven team, whispers followed her like a shadow. "Lucky break," some muttered. "Dead woman walking," others said quietly. But every time Elise closed her eyes, she remembered the convoy reversing out of Karvik Pass. She remembered the sound of tank treads scraping rock, proof she had been right. Proof that listening, even when no one believed her, mattered. One evening, she sat on the roof with her headset, the desert sunset washing the base in crimson light. Through the static, she caught fragments and accents she recognized instantly. It was them. The same voices she had first heard that morning when she thought she was just fixing an antenna. "Eliminate the leak. Payment doubles if alive." Her hand tightened around her notepad. The threat hadn't faded, it had grown. But Elise no longer trembled. She adjusted the array, caught their coordinates, and relayed them directly to Colonel Hale. Within hours, a Raven team strike force intercepted the enemy cell. When they returned, one of the Ravens handed Elise a confiscated radio, its frequency still tuned to the same channel she had been monitoring. "They were still talking about you," the Raven said. "Seems you've made an impression." That night, Elise sat alone in her bunk, staring at the ceiling. She thought about the word hero. People tossed it around so easily, but she knew better. Heroes weren't larger-than-life figures marching onto battlefields. Sometimes heroes were the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones who listened when no one else did. She hadn't asked for this role. She hadn't sought glory, but fate had thrust it upon her, and she had stepped forward. The desert winds howled outside, carrying with them the whispers of enemies still searching for the woman who had turned their plans to dust. They could keep searching, because Elise Ward wasn't just fixing antennas anymore. She was listening, watching, waiting, and she was ready.